All right, and just as a reminder, we are recording this, and I will be sending out a link with the recording and some additional information at the end. I'll make another announcement towards the end. So if you're not able to join with us live today, you will be receiving the recording. And just one other housekeeping issue, if you have any questions, please put them in the chat. I'll be monitoring that, and we'll get started. So thanks, everyone. My name is Steve Jerch. I am the director of the Center for Policy and Practice here at ACCT, and thank you for joining me. Today, we're going to be talking a little bit about enrollment issues, and we all know that enrollment issue seems to be a constant topic, particularly for community colleges, and we know that enrollment always ebbs and flows for a variety of different factors, such as the economy, labor market demands, but of course, most recently, a public health crisis. So when students leave our institutions, how do we get them to come back? We have seen multiple initiatives ranging from tuition assistance, additional class terms offered, like boot camp types of things, large advertising pushes, and other campaign-based strategies. But do these things really work, or is a more comprehensive approach needed? And so ACCT was approached by New America to serve on an advisory board to help inform this project that we're going to be discussing today, to really get to the bottom of how to bring adult students back to campus. And so I'd like to introduce Chris Geary. He's a senior policy analyst with New America, and he led this project. And I'm going to turn it over to him in just a second to share a bit more about it, discuss their findings, and then we'll have a panel discussion, including one of the colleges that participated in the project, to share their experience. So Chris, I believe you have some slides you want to share?
Yes, I do. Thanks so much, Steve. I will share my screen, so everyone can just give me a quick second to do that. And also, I saw in the chat, someone said it looked like the chat was disabled, but just to be clear, as a co-host, we can see the chat, so feel free to put questions in as they arise, and we'll monitor that. All right. So I will just make this the right setting. And oh, 1 second here. All right. So it looks like that should work. Steve, Ashunda, others, just make a quick confirmation. Looks like, okay, great. Well, good afternoon, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us today. As Steve mentioned, my name is Chris Geary. I'm a senior policy analyst at the Center on Education and Labor at New America. I'm also the author of the Bringing Adults Back to Community College Playbook that we published last week. I'll be going over a brief presentation with kind of an outline of our project, our work with a cohort of colleges, including Prairie State, which is where Ashunda Williams is from. I'll introduce her later on. Yeah, I'm just really excited to be here and to have this conversation today. So just to get us started, I wanted to contextualize this conversation with some numbers that are probably all too familiar to folks on the call, but still I think are really just important to have some context for what we're going to get into today. So this slide shows changes in college enrollment from fall 2019, that's right before the pandemic began, to fall 2021. And we see really clear enrollment declines across all sectors of higher education, but they are particularly pronounced at community colleges. But we looked at a more nuanced interpretation of enrollment data that I think actually tells an even more troubling picture. And so this slide shows the enrollment of first-time adult students, that is, students over the age of 25 that enrolled in college for the first time between 2019 and 2021. And what we actually see is, while there are on average declines for first-time adult students, we see slight increases at for-profit institutions and particularly large declines at community colleges. Now, this is troubling given that for-profit institutions have worse economic and educational outcomes than community colleges do, both in terms of thinking about student debt as well as future employment and economic outcomes. So this is a real problem that the whole field needs to grapple with. So given this, as well as the fact that community colleges serve more than half of all undergraduate students from low-income families, community college enrollment declines threaten to worsen educational inequity. Now, the Center on Education and Labor at New America wanted to offset these declines. So to do so, we partnered with 6 colleges in 3 states over the course of 18 months. We worked with each college on a one-on-one basis and came up with tailored specific campus recommendations. And then we published a playbook with recommendations for colleges nationwide based on our research. In this slide, I have an outline of the Bringing Adults Back to Community College cohort. So we worked with 2 colleges in Oregon, that's Mount Hood Community College and Southwestern Oregon Community College. 2 colleges in Illinois, that's Harry S. Truman College, which is one of the city colleges of Chicago, as well as Prairie State College, where Ashunda works. And then 2 colleges in Louisiana, those are Delgado and Fletcher Technical Community College. Now, before I jump into our findings, I just wanted to go over a few of the sort of like introductory sections of our playbook, which again, you can access at our website, newamerica.org, which has far more details than I'll be able to go in this short presentation, but just a really important point to make up front. So we outlined in our playbook that colleges are constrained by local and state environments. And so based on the work with this cohort, as well as other research and work we do with community colleges at New America, we just want to contextualize that all the factors that impact community college enrollment are often, or not all of those factors are things that colleges can control themselves. And so when we think about district and system offices, state and local policy, local labor markets, and then local higher education ecosystems, there are obviously things outside of the control of any individual college. And so I do really want to offer that as important framing. We are very aware of all of the things going on outside of a college's control that dictate or help dictate enrollment trends. And then again, for folks that access our playbook, you'll see that it's quite long, it's quite detailed. That's on purpose. It's supposed to be actionable. And we also, we start this off with a section on how to get started using the playbook and also just thinking about ways to revamp adult enrollment broadly. And so there's a section at the beginning on how to determine priorities. And again, this is just important context that we understand that colleges can't do everything we recommend. We recommend things that are very impactful, but also beyond the scope of what one college can feasibly implement, certainly in a short time period. And so because of that, we offer some steps for colleges to begin this process to try to get a sense of important priority areas on your campus. With that aside, I want to jump right into the themes and recommendations that are outlined in much more detail in our playbook that again, all stem from our research with this cohort of colleges. So based on this work, we recommend that community colleges should 1, improve their communications with adult students, 2, revise their satisfactory academic progress or SAP policies, 3, increase course flexibility, 4, establish case management systems for enrollment and advising, and 5, help students afford their basic needs. So I'm going to jump into each of these themes and recommendations in more detail. And to do so, I'm actually going to lead with some quotes and really try to incorporate student voice throughout this presentation. So as part of this work, we conducted in-depth qualitative interviews with current and stopped out adult students at each college in our cohort. We also conducted focus groups with faculty and staff and campus leadership to make sure that our research was informed by a variety of stakeholder perspectives. And so our first theme for how community colleges can increase adult enrollment is all about improving communications. I think this quote from a stopped out adult student at a college in our cohort really speaks to this broader trend on the need to improve communications. So this student shared with us, with enrollment, advisors need to communicate better. I sat around in 2020. I was waiting on an advisor to let me know what classes I was supposed to register in. It was weeks I was waiting until they finally got back to me. I didn't know that I was supposed to enroll at the City Park campus, and I started at another campus. Because of this, I took classes that first year that I didn't need to take. Nobody's trying to take extra classes. That's like money that could have gone to something you actually needed. Oops. So to offset this problem, we offer 4 recommendations for community colleges nationwide. The first is to create a messaging campaign on the specific financial benefits of career and technical education or CTE programs that your campus offers. So given that so many adults attend community college to increase their economic security, and because of that, so many adults are attracted to or interested in CTE programs, we believe that messaging campaigns that really lift up those potential economic benefits of enrolling in a CTE program on your college are a great way to help bring back adults to campus. The second recommendation is to create a central place on your website for returning adult students with step-by-step re-enrollment directions. We go into this way more actually in the playbook, but websites are an untapped resource, I would say, for a lot of community colleges when thinking about how to actually increase enrollment. And it can be very challenging for a returning student to navigate websites and try to figure out all that they need to do in order to re-enroll in classes. And so having some type of central place, a landing page with clear step-by-step instructions that's aimed at these returning adults is a really helpful strategy here. The third recommendation is to hire enrollment navigators, which is something I'll come back to later on in this presentation, and communicate their availability to students. And the fourth is to create a set of incentives to entice students to re-enroll. Now, I want to jump into that incentives piece because I think when we were talking with colleges in this cohort and other colleges we work, we hear that term incentive and immediately, thinks about, oh man, this sounds expensive, right? How are we going to afford that? Of course, we'd love to incentivize students to return, but how can we do it? So I want to lift up a success story here for Mount Hood Community College. So during this project, Mount Hood made the decision to reduce outstanding student balances in a way that would remove registration holds for 685 students. These were students that owed more than $500 to the college. Mount Hood decided to invest in that and reduce that such that these students were eligible to re-enroll in classes. In doing so, this led to a 285 student enrollment increase and netted a nearly $400,000 return on investment for the college. And so here's an example of an incentive that is something Mount Hood did need to spend money on upfront, but because it led to this enrollment increase, this effort more than paid off in the short term. So what I really want to make this point is that incentivizing students to come back to campus can actually be financially viable and financially beneficial in the short, medium, and long run for your college. Our second theme is about revising SAP, or satisfactory academic progress. So just to take a step back and make sure everyone on the call is familiar with this, just because SAP is very complicated and I think level setting on it up front can be helpful. So to be eligible for federal financial aid authorized under Title IV of the Higher Education Act, colleges are required to have a defined satisfactory academic progress policy, and students to be eligible to receive federal financial aid are required to make satisfactory academic progress. So generally, this means, or for many colleges anyways, to make SAP, students need to hit at least a 2.0 GPA, and they must pass at least 2/3 of the classes they're enrolled in. Again, this is things that folks on the call might be very familiar with, but some might be less so, so just wanted to level set. So while SAP is something that is required for colleges, and something that's dictated by legislation, there actually are things colleges can do to make this process more student-friendly. Before I get into that, I want to lift up this quote from an administrator at one of the colleges in our cohort. SAP is one of those hot button issues. Last semester alone, we've seen more SAP requests than ever before. Students are having other challenges, but it is affecting the SAP process. We saw in a student survey, when you get into trouble with SAP, you start getting these emails that are using words like probation and threatening dismissal. That can compound issues. So to revise SAP to be more student-friendly and help more adult students re-enroll in classes, we offer 3 recommendations. The first is to improve communications with students before and after they fail to make SAP. The second is to create a fair, well-documented, and simplified appeals process that can allow students an opportunity to successfully appeal a SAP failure. And the third is to analyze SAP patterns by race, gender, and Pell status to see if there are any inequities on your campus in terms of which students are more likely to actually fail to make SAP. I again want to lift up a success story from one of the colleges in our cohort, this time as it relates to SAP. So during this project, Delgado re-examined their SAP appeals data. It was something our team had actually caught and flagged. And so Delgado re-examined this SAP appeals data, and they noticed that hundreds of students had incomplete SAP appeals, and as a result were ineligible to receive federal financial aid, which became a huge barrier to their re-enrollment. But when they looked a little deeper, they found out that all of these students had incomplete SAP appeals because they failed to submit third-party documentation. That was something that the college required students do. They had to submit some type of document to go along with their SAP appeal to sort of back up their case on why they were unable to make SAP in a given term. So Delgado realized that was simply an institutional policy. That wasn't something that was required from the federal government. And when they decided to remove that third-party documentation requirement, they now no longer have a single student with an incomplete SAP appeal. So this opened up the door to nearly 600 students who were ineligible to receive federal financial aid and therefore unlikely to re-enroll. And so now hundreds of students, as a result of this change, were eligible for federal financial aid and had an easier path to re-enroll in college. Our third theme, increased course flexibility, really has to do with what it means to be an adult student. So many adult students are balancing school with work and caregiving responsibilities and everything else that comes with being an adult. And a lot of traditional classes really aren't designed for that adult student schedule. I think this quote from a current student at a college in our cohort really speaks to this, this theme quite well. Taking virtual courses was awesome. I had a newborn. She was born right before the pandemic. So I went back in the fall of 2020 and it was all online. So I didn't have to do any shifting or anything. And I loved it. I wouldn't have gone to the class at all if it hadn't been online. So to increase course flexibility as a way to increase enrollment of adult students, again, we're really offering 3 recommendations that are designed to offer more classes that are outside of the traditional in-person workday. So to do that, we recommend 1, offering more night and weekend courses. We understand staffing constraints there. We get into that a bit more in the playbook. It's a very real limitation. And if you were able to do so, it would drive adult enrollment increases. Our second recommendation is to offer more high flex courses. We've defined this to mean courses that can be taken virtually or in person. And again, in the playbook, we get into all of the things a college would need to think through in order to have high quality, high flex courses that can scale. There are challenges there, both in terms of technology and training, and again, staffing and things like that. But we outlined that in more detail in the playbook. And the third actually comes, this recommendation comes from one of our colleges in this cohort who made a really great point that it's not enough to offer adults individual courses that are flexible, but you really need flexibility for an entire program. So if an adult is able to take a full program from start to completion in a flexible way that works with their schedule, they are much more likely to complete that program than if they just have one class that works on a night or weekend, but isn't offered in that time in a subsequent term or semester. Our fourth theme is about establishing case management for enrollment and advising. And this quote from a stopped out student at a college in our cohort really speaks to the central challenge we saw with advising at colleges kind of throughout this cohort and more broadly. So this stopped out student shared with us, I felt that there were too many emails that got me confused. I just want to talk to one person, like one person to ask all of my questions. I don't want to go through different offices. They say go to this one for financial aid, this one for health insurance. The pandemic made it hard and virtual made it not attractive. So our recommendation here is to hire enrollment navigators to help integrate enrollment and advising, and to really think of enrollment and advising as one continuum of services that your college offers to prospective students and then ultimately to enrolled students. And so enrollment navigators are trained professionals whose job is really to work with students from application or the re-enrollment process all the way up to the first day of classes. Now, under a case management system, those enrollment navigators can develop one-on-one relationships with students and then introduce those students to their college navigator, or more traditionally, a college advisor. where that college navigator or college advisor can work with the same students throughout the duration of their academic tenure at that college. Now, one of the benefits of having a case management system like this is college advisors who are assigned to work with students over their entire academic career can develop close relationships and understand when those students might need to be introduced to a benefits coordinator or a benefits navigator, which tees up my next theme quite well. So our final theme is on addressing basic needs in security. And I think this quote from a student at one of the colleges in our cohort really makes this point better than I can. Everything costs so much, and I'm at the point where now I can barely afford groceries, and I can get public assistance and still can't afford groceries. I don't plan on living like that. It's not a goal of mine. My goal is to be financially stable where I can take care of my children without public assistance. Now, I'm sure folks in the call know this based on their experience on their own campuses, but basic needs and security is just so widespread at community colleges nationwide, and it's increased throughout the pandemic in a way that really is going to alter student success and ultimately a student's ability to enroll or re-enroll in college. And so to help address basic needs in security, obviously at a broader systemic level, colleges need more resources and we need policy changes at the state and federal level to really address this. But in the absence of those changes, there are things colleges can do to help address basic needs and security on their campuses. And I'm sure many colleges on the line are already employing a lot of these strategies. But we recommend colleges hire benefits navigators or trained professionals whose jobs are to coordinate basic needs support on campus and help students access available resources, whether those be public benefits programs or other community-based resources. The second is to require student basic needs training for all faculty and staff to help drive an entire campus culture aimed at the need to reduce basic needs insecurity as a student success and student enrollment strategy. The third recommendation is to review institutional policies relating to basic needs and financial aid to see if there's anything your college does that unintentionally makes things worse for students who are struggling to afford their basic needs. And finally, our fourth recommendation is to offer students free resources. There's so many great examples of community colleges throughout the pandemic finding ways to offer students free food or transportation vouchers or free technology or anything else that can help students actually afford all of the living expenses they need to undertake in order to be college students. And to the extent possible, any effort your college can do to maintain that moving forward will really help. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and we'll move into our panel discussion. So I'm lucky enough to be joined by Ashunda Williams, who's the Manager of Academic Advising, and also I just learned the Interim Director of Equity and Inclusion, so wearing very many hats at Prairie State College, as well as Iris Palmer, who is the Deputy Director for Community Colleges at New America. So with that, I will stop sharing my screen and look forward to this discussion.
Thanks, Chris. That was some great information. And before we get started, I misspoke at the very beginning. So if you do have questions, you can use the question and answer function at the bottom of your screen, not the chat. So I apologize for that. And we will do our best to try and answer them today. If not, we will have the ability to answer them via email. So to start off, I'd like this, this is addressed to the entire panel. I'd love to hear from each of you about why this work matters. So why is it important for community colleges to focus on adult students, and why should colleges not just in your pilot project, but nationwide be prioritizing enrollment services and student outreach? So why don't we start with Iris, actually?
Thanks, Steve. So first of all, I just want to say thank you to the ECMC Foundation who funded this work and our partners who provided technical assistance, Student Ready Strategies, who did amazing work with us on this project. And then to answer your question, I think most colleges are familiar with the a little bit grim outlook for high school graduates. We really see a large decline in that number going forward. And as we weather some of the unpredictable economic and public health situations that are happening in this country, it's going to be more and more important that colleges build up their capacity to be proactive about their enrollment. And that is particularly true for adult students who will not just naturally come to your colleges. And for students who have dropped out of your college, maybe they had a bad experience, being able to reach out to them and help them re-enroll. So it's an all-and strategy, I think, for colleges around the country at this point. And so we really wanted to, with this project, focus on a particular slice of that problem, but then hopefully we can generalize it to help colleges think about how to build up their capacity for re-enrollment and enrollment just more generally as they really face some of these difficult demographic and situational variations that are happening across the country. So I'll just leave it there, and I'd love to hear from everybody else.
Sure. Ashenda, why don't you give your perspective?
Thank you. Thank you. So I do also want to say thank you to New America and to Student Ready Strategies, because they did help us shed some light on some of the things that we weren't really paying attention to because we're so bogged down in the day-to-day business of making the college work. We hadn't stopped to say to students, what about you? What about your experience? What can we do to help you individually as a group? And so this was outstanding work done by New America, and it really helped us a lot. But I mean, I want to say that community college is important, and the work that we do and the people that we help is really important, because college changes everything. We know that, the old adage, college changes everything. But I think in community colleges, we change whole communities. And so if we can say to a student who has pulled up into the parking lot and sat there and didn't come in because they were afraid of what might happen, if they might get the help, if the work might be too difficult, if they could afford it or not. If we can say to those students, the people inside are welcoming, engaging, encouraging, ready to connect you to additional services, we can change whole communities. So we find that, our adult students want to do more with their lives, change their lives. Like Chris said, some of the students that gave quotes, they want to make some changes in their life, but they don't necessarily know how to go about doing it because they hadn't had a role model to do that with, for, or about them. And so when we say to students, come back, or if it's your first time, come in, we want to be sure that we have all the supports and services that they need when they get here.
No, that's some great perspective. And Chris, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I mean, I have almost too many because I could just go on and on about why this is so important. I think what I'll focus on a bit more, kind of building from Ashenda's point, is specifically the focus on adults, right, and why that matters so much. I think from a college perspective, I think there's sort of a strategic element, right? Like these are adult students are people that really need and want to improve their economic security, and community colleges are sort of the perfect way to do that. So I think there's that sort of like practical, these are students that community colleges should be enrolling at higher numbers, but there's a much bigger point to be made when we think about just the role of community colleges in advancing economic mobility in the country, and helping prepare the workforce and kind of helping deliver on that promise that Ashenda was talking about advancing community well-being. I really can't think of a better group of students to focus on than adult students, than people who maybe have had to stop out or take a long break in their educational journey, or maybe they tried a 4-year at one point and it didn't work, or maybe they had a bad experience, maybe at a community college, right? But they're still trying to go to improve their economic security and put their family on a pathway to economic mobility. And so I think the need is so high, and community colleges can really do this work well. So to me, it's really a good synthesis of need, of community college purpose, and then of community college ability in terms of actually serving adult students well. And I think the last thing I'll share, it came from a focus group with staff members, faculty members rather, at one of the colleges in our cohort, and they made the point that if you transform your class or your institution to serve adults well, you're going to end up transforming your institution to serving all students well. And that's because of all of the things that adults go through on a day-to-day basis. So it really just feels like a perfect place for community colleges to focus on for so many reasons.
No, I think that's great. And you know, it's to your point, is the students are there. They're there. It's just how do we bring them back, you know, for lack of a better term. So Shonda, if I could turn back to you for a second. You talked about, you had some impactful statements around how community colleges can change entire communities. So could you share a little bit about what your experience was working with New America in this project?
Absolutely. So when we did begin to work with New America, they made it really important to come to our campus and to have student ready strategies come to our campus and talk to all of our stakeholders. We had folks from the enrollment office, the testing center, advising, financial aid, business office, academic affairs side of the house, deans, professors. We had everyone come to the table, of course, our upper administrators as well, and talk about the things that we do well and the things that we may not be focusing on as much as we need to. So we had a lot of eye-opening conversations in small groups and large groups. We were able to sort of collectively talk about removing barriers for students to return to college. We took a look at our processes. What really shed a lot of light on the fact that maybe students don't know what to do and how to do it is that, you know, they kind of let us know that our website wasn't really directed toward what to do next, what to do first. It's not really a marketing tool. We were able to hire a company now to redesign our website. So we use that as a marketing tool, and we now have Pioneer Portal to help students do functional things. And so we separated the two. I mean, we found out a lot about some of the things that would help our students be more comfortable and use all the resources that we have. We have tons of resources. Are we marketing them? Do they even know about them? We tell them, we send emails, do they read those? But then when there's an immediate need and we say, oh, we have this, we told you about that. They're like, when? When did you tell me about that? And so we do have resources for students, but they don't always know that those resources are there. So New America and Student Ready Strategies really helped us focus on those things we do well and highlight those things for our students.
So thanks for sharing that. I just want to add one follow-up based on that last piece that you just mentioned. You talked about all these things that you learned, and I really appreciate the systemic approach that was taken. I think a lot of times with enrollment challenges, it's these campaign-based types of initiative which work, but I think in order to really get to the root of the issue, it has to be a systemic approach. So if you had to share one of the most impactful things that you learned out of this project that you weren't, either was brought to your attention, you weren't doing it, or something you were doing well, what would that be?
I would say we have lots of areas in our college that do things really well, focused on adult students for adult basic ed, focused on tutoring for students who struggle, focused on providing financial aid, focused on doing payment plans with students, but we weren't doing an awesome job at making sure all of those offices work together to rally around a student. So when we talk about wraparound services, the things that we have, there wasn't like a hub, a place where all things can happen. Like Chris said, students want a one-stop shop if at all possible. Can I talk to you about my financial aid needs, my payment plan needs, my need for tutoring, or do I only get to talk to you about planning my schedule? So we have moved to a case management version of academic advising because we've always had assigned academic advisors, but we weren't pushing students to make sure you stay with the person who knows that you have a house, a wife, a life, a dog, a cat, a significant other, a boyfriend, a girlfriend, a job, some kids. That one person that knows all of your things can better serve you and provide you with directed services, connect you with the right people at the right time. So I think we're doing a better job of that. Some of the things that we do well, we didn't really communicate that to students and provide those things to students. So now we have that. And Student Ready Strategies and New America helped us to survey those students who had stopped out and ask them. We hadn't been doing a great job of asking people, why are you leaving? Or why haven't you come back? But this gave us that opportunity to ask those questions, get answers, and provide better services for them.
No, that's fantastic. How you sort of pivoted once you learned what was happening, how you then implemented some of those solutions. So you mentioned at the very end that there were some things that you didn't know, or that someone knew all of someone's barriers. So I want to pivot to Chris and Iris now. So based on this project, some of your other research that you've done, what are some of the barriers that you've found to implementing effective adult recruitment and enrollment strategies? So Chris, let's start with you.
Yeah, I appreciate the question. I think it kind of depends on the college, but I think there are barriers in terms of kind of like a campus cultural buy-in. We've seen that at different places where, there's kind of some ideas on like, well, like people just come to community college. We don't necessarily need to go find them, or, kind of things like that. And so that can be a barrier in and of itself, is just buying into the work in terms of proactive enrollment, and then specifically focusing on adults. I think beyond that, though, at a higher level, I think sort of the biggest barrier I've seen is just doing so many different things at so many different points, and not really having the capacity and resources necessary to take that step back and say, like, hold on, what are we actually doing at a higher level to synthesize this? And to Ashunda's point, like, Prairie State's doing so many amazing things, but that didn't mean that it was necessarily part of sort of a coordinated enrollment effort, right? It was more like, we're doing all these things in different ways, in different capacities, and if students find them, that's great. It's gonna, help increase retention and student success, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's kind of living under this umbrella of like everyone on board. So I think that campus buy-in, and then sort of again, that like notion of tying things together in a cohesive strategy. I think so. Those are some of the barriers, and a lot of that is absolutely due to strain capacity, lack of resources, and just not enough. Too many people wearing too many hats. I mean, we mentioned Ashunda's titles, right, and adding on jobs, and that can be a real challenge for a college that's trying to think bigger picture about their overall recruitment strategy.
Yeah,
Go ahead,
so
Iris. Yeah.
a couple of things that I just want to add on there and just say, yes, I totally agree with Chris. There's a cultural component, and then there's a capacity component, and having sort of a strategic vision for integrating adults effectively into your enrollment strategy, and then making that enrollment strategy and the culture that serves those students systemic, and it's everyone's job, right? So we heard a lot like, oh, I just do enrollment, so I do like campaigns, I do marketing, so I only do the marketing piece, and they don't necessarily talk to the people who run the programs or have a system in place where they connect all the different parts of the institution. And a big part of that is the fact that there isn't enough capacity. And I think it's a combination of funding, but it's also a combination of retention. Some of these jobs are not always great jobs, and people don't necessarily have places to move professionally. So keeping people and keeping them in place and sustained in this particular employment environment can be a real struggle. And we've heard that from many, many colleges. And so how do you make the jobs better, be able to fund them, don't overwhelm the people you do have, like try to create a system that actually supports people. And so if I'm a faculty member and I know somebody's sleeping in their car, I know where to go and what to do, and I don't feel overwhelmed, and the people I'm talking to don't feel overwhelmed. And we have sort of a consistent group of people who show up every day and who know they're being taken care of by the institution, who have good jobs. I think that's one of the biggest challenges that we've seen. So it's sort of a combination of what Chris said coming together in like a way that is very unhelpful, I think, to orienting institutions towards this sort of goal. The only other thing I want to add is, Ashunda, I would love to hear a little bit more about sort of the context of Prairie State, because I think you have a really unique context, and every community college does, but I think it might be helpful for the audience to hear a little bit more about sort of the world that you live in and how that might translate to other colleges.
So our students are 70+% of students who use financial aid. We're a minority serving institution. We have a lot of students who are first generation. So when students come here, they know they want college. They don't know how to navigate it necessarily. And so when they encounter our enrollment process, which is, apply, send transcripts, get with an advisor right away to do placement testing or to have a review of any ACT, SAT, that advisor takes the opportunity to say, what do you want to be when you grow up? And we make it clear that we don't even know what we want to be when we grow up yet. So if you don't know, that's fine. And then get them started on where they are academically and where they want to be, whatever that goal is, complete a degree, a certificate, of course, just be in college at all, whatever that goal is, connect that with making a plan of how to get there. And then what resources could you use to get there? So if you have some food insecurities, some housing insecurities, we can't individually as academic advisors remove those barriers, but we know where to send you, where to walk you to, who to call while you're in the office with us. And we spend that time. So with assigned academic advising, we have the liberal arts social sciences advisor, the career tech ed, the allied health, the STEM advisor, but we do have first year experience advisors who have this whole function of, now you're here, let's get you started, whether you know where you want to be or not. And in that first semester or two, I will reach out to you regularly and make sure you have the things you need. And after you've been here a little while, we get you to that program of study advisor that knows your program, your pathway, get you an academic plan, make sure you still have those resources that you need. But whatever your goal is, when do you want to get there? How do you want to get there? You're taking 2 classes at a time. You're taking 5 classes at a time. You have a house, a wife, a life, a dog, a cat, a significant other, some things that you are also focusing on. And so maybe 3 classes are enough. 2 classes are enough. Does it need to be online? And we really work with our students to make sure it's a good fit for them at that time, knowing that that student's going to shift eventually and start working less hours or need to work more hours. And we change with them as they change. We send our outreach to our students several times during the semester to say, how are you doing? Do you need anything? But then we say, come in and let's talk more about the plan that you're on. Is it still working? Come in and let's talk more about registering for the next semester. Here's some things we know are going on at Prairie State. We know we just had an opportunity for students to apply for some basic needs funds. We send that blast out they send it out as a college-wide, but we send it out from the academic advisor to the assigned group of students to say, hey, we talked about you might need this, and here it is. Hurry up before it closes and before, those resources are gone. So we do like the assigned advisor approach because it does help us to help the student more.
That's a fantastic perspective. And I think what we're hearing is it's not just about the technical training piece, it's dealing with the whole student. And I think that's, if students know they're going to get the resources they need and the help they need, it makes it that much easier to come back to campus. And so I'd like to, 2 things. One, I'm very impressed, Ashunda, with your list of different life barriers. And I'm wondering how long it took you to learn that, because it just rattles off the tongue very naturally.
I've been in higher ed 20 years, and that's not the whole list. There's so many things.
Yeah.
There's so many things that students are facing, so many struggles, and we don't like for them to focus on it as a struggle, but more of oh, you have that and this? Okay, well, let's figure out how they all work together, right, and let's make it work.
So one thing, and I'm going to take a little bit of privilege here, and we had a great question that came across, and which is related to this. And we talk about all the institutions providing resources, but and I know there's work out there around cohort-based modeling. And so, do you can you point to any specific research or that you've or that you learned as part of this project about how adults feel about cohort-based programs? I know that that can create that sense of belonging, connection, and not only to the institution but to the peer-to-peer support. And I'm wondering if you had any experience with that, and anyone can answer.
I'm happy to take it while other people think. I haven't seen any research about this in a community college context. Obviously, it's more of a 4-year innovation. And that's, I think, because it's very difficult to administer for many community colleges, because people don't necessarily stay enrolled at the same level all the way through their entire program. And so what you have is a lot of people shifting in and shifting out, which can make it very difficult to deal with a cohorted program. That being said, we are very familiar with a bachelor's degree program at a college, Centralia College in Washington, which is cohorted based. And it was actually created by somebody who was trying to recreate the sort of liberal arts experience that she found so edifying in undergrad. And it's been incredibly successful. So basically it's it's not quite high flex, but I would definitely say hybrid, where they just have one day a week where they're on campus, and the rest of the time, I mean, this is without COVID, obviously, they are online and do sort of online activities and guided homework and things like that. But they have sort of like that set aside time for face-to-face interactions with their cohort. And we spoke with a whole set of students in that program, and they loved it. Many of them had failed other types of programs before, more traditional face-to-face programs, because they couldn't fit work around it. The same gentleman had failed online programs because he couldn't stay motivated. And this was like the perfect balance between having that sort of stickiness that the cohort model gives you, where you don't want to let your colleagues down who are also enrolled in the program, and you bond with your faculty members. And so that had kept, and you have that face-to-face interaction while also having the flexibility of knowing when you're going to be on campus that one day that you pulled out. And so that was very helpful for them. I mean, it's anecdotal, but I will say it's qualitative research. And so I think if it's something you can administer, and we did talk about some people who hadn't finished that program and how they couldn't necessarily slot new people into the classes, and how that was a real difficult thing to administer and to fund, frankly, because you just have like a dwindling head count, and it can be very difficult. But for the students, they had an amazing experience. It was also a co-taught model, so sort of like iBest, except it was people with that sort of quality expertise, and then also somebody in business, right? So they were doing sort of like that kind of co-teaching model as well, which was a really interesting and innovative model.
So I'll say, like Iris said, it is difficult at the community college level because we have a lot of stop-ins, stop-outs, and different levels of, preparedness, and we have different levels of number of credit hours a student can take, what sort of course load. But our allied health programs are very lockstep and very cohort. When you are admitted to a selective admissions program, it's you and that other group of 80 students or 40 students or 60 students, depending on the program that you're in. And you guys are together for the long haul. And that support that they receive from one another is awesome. And I would say it does get you through, because you all have things in addition to the academic piece that you're going through, and they support each other in study groups. They support each other when they go to tutoring together, they go to clinical together, and they're always together with whatever the academic struggle or life struggle is. So cohorts, I believe, are a big, important piece if you can get it to work, if it is a function that your school already fully supports. So our allied health programs are our sort of cohort version.
No, I think in my experience, and I would agree with that. And I think, we saw the benefit of a cohort model, but it was hard to institutionalize at the community college. And I think ours were successful, but they were, specialty type programs, we either grant funded or, project based, but, I do think they are successful if they can be implemented. Chris, did you want to add something?
Yeah, just really quick. All I was going to add is it's really not a traditional cohort based model, but we have seen a lot of examples of things that colleges have done specifically for groups like student parents, where they're not, again, it's not a cohort academic model, but there have been ways to have some of those elements where student parents have been able to come together through regular meetings and have that peer-to-peer connection and realize I'm not the only student on campus who's balancing childcare and what it means to be a parent and work and school and all these things. And so even if it's not possible or feasible, or if your college hasn't bought into like the whole cohort design, I think there are things you can do to think about getting those benefits of peer-to-peer interaction and relationships to make sure students feel supported.
No, I think that's all, that was a great question. So thanks to Cindy for asking that. But the next question is definitely related. So I think this is a nice segue. So Another thing we hear from community colleges is that they'd like to do this. They'd like to do this systemic approach, but they don't know exactly where to start, or they're worried about facing resistance from important stakeholders. You're getting pushback on, from faculty or administration or wherever the case is. So if you had can you share some advice on how community colleges can begin to transform their institution to better serve these adults? So like, where do they start? So let's start with, Ashunda. She's the closest to the ground on this. So
Call New America and student ready strategies. One of the things that we're looking at doing over the summer is having focus groups and surveys geared toward like, what is it that attracted you to our institution? What is it that is working well for you? What is it that is not working well for you? One of our top administrators always says, do you know if this is working, and how do you know? Like, what's working? How do you know? You can't just say it's working. You got to show some data. So if we get students in a room and talk to them and ask them different cohort groups, different demographics, different age group, different ethnicities, different programs, and say what works well for you, then we can sort of synthesize that data and look at where we need to do more and make sure all the stakeholders are in the room. Believe it or not, I think it was an awesome experience for us. We had professors in the room along with all of our student support services. And those professors and advisors and testing center folk had an opportunity to say, this is what I've heard from students. What have you heard? And then we talked about all the things that we have heard in common and the things that we had never heard, like, oh, well, we didn't know that, because we hadn't heard that from students because we hadn't asked students. So it's time to ask students. If you ask me, it's time to ask students. And then I think we found, and I think that you'll find that when all the stakeholders are in the room, well, feed them. But when all the stakeholders are in the room, we like to hear what students have to say, the good, the bad, and the ugly. Because all of us wake up in the morning and say, who am I going to help today? What student am I going to help succeed? What can I do to provide other resources for students? And all of us want to hear what the student experience is and what we can do better. It wakes us up. It helps us feel like our purpose is being met. So if you get the stakeholders in the room and talk to students also, then everybody has this common goal of, oh, this is what our precious students want us to do. We really value them. We would love to hear from them. And as a group, you get a chance to say, great, let's stick together and continue this effort of helping them in a way that they say they need help.
that's a great perspective. Iris, do you want to share anything?
Well, first of all, I just want to say, Ashunda, that is exactly right. As far as
that's what I was going to say too. I was so happy hearing that.
Institutionalize talking to your students, and not just people who come to meetings all the time, but literally like your least connected students. Because when we do student focus groups with that are done through contractors, and they just recruit random students who want like the $50 incentive, what we hear from those students is incredibly valuable. I don't think that those messages are necessarily getting through to a lot of college administrators. I think college administrators just assume that people know how to navigate their institutions, and it's really hard to see it through the eyes of somebody who's loosely connected to your institution. So just starting with like giving even just free lunch and just bringing in students who aren't necessarily in student government or really connected, and having those conversations and asking them what struggles they have, and do they know about these different resources? How would they like to be communicated with? Which we hear a lot about how they don't like how colleges communicate with them, and they tune out everything. And so even just getting that perspective, and even if you can't fix it, just understanding why they're struggling to connect in different ways is incredibly valuable. So I think starting there is brilliant. I think it also helps to have a president like Prairie State who is very, very committed to changing the institution and ensuring that the institution is serving this population and serving students well. Of course, we can't always control that. So I think starting with those student conversations to bring people around is a really brilliant idea.
Yeah, and the only thing I would add, in addition to having those conversations and centering student voice, is also to really look to whatever extent possible at any numbers and data you have on what students have left. Have they left for more than a semester, more than a year? Are there patterns in that? What does it look like? by race, by Pell status, by program, right? And really try to get an accurate sense on which students are leaving or are coming back or aren't. And if so, if you have that sense and then combine that with talking to students, I think you'll quite quickly, come to, oh, these are the 2-3 things in our campus that we've really got to focus on. And that'll make it easier to have a priority area to really orient, the whole campus around.
No, thanks for that. I think we might have, let me ask this question. This came in the chat as well. And this might be towards Ashunda or actually anyone, because of the other colleges that aren't on the panel today. So can you talk a little bit about your high flex courses? Were they successful? In theory, a lot of times they sound great, but it's hard to implement them. So I didn't know if there's any information you can share around like some good modeling around how those were set up.
I'd actually be happy for that question. We spend a lot of time with this in the playbook itself. And so we have, I'd point you to that section of the playbook. We have more detailed resources on what you really need to do in your campus to have this go well. Because again, to us, the high flex option means that students can actually take it fully virtual or in person or have some kind of combination. And so to do that well, there's a lot of logistical challenges. There's technology and staffing and even how you structure a room, right? Like you've really got to think about how students who are taking it virtually can contribute and be a part of that. So I'll just pause there, but I did want to say that we have more resources on that in the playbook. But Ashunda, if you had a class perspective you wanted to share, that would be fantastic.
One of the first high flex classes we offered was a Spanish class. And the Spanish professor advertised that, sent flyers to us. We sent the flyers out and students really didn't know what high flex meant, even though it kind of said right there on the flyer. So when we did convene with New America and Student Ready Strategies, sort of at the end of our research, we did have one of the cohort, well, I keep calling us the cohort, but the group of people that New America worked with, show us an infographic that they have of sort of how to explain in pictures what an online class is, what an on-campus class is, what a high flex class is. And while students don't always take the time to read everything, they see sort of emoji icons and they know what that means already. So if you do offer high flex classes, make sure it's very clear what that means. And then we are looking at doing more because we know, for instance, our child development program, early childhood education program, those students literally work in the field and they're in a daycare from 8A to 7P in some cases. And they want to pop in and hear the professor give the lecture. So that program, the coordinator specifically says, hop in at 11 when you put the kids down for a nap, or when they're doing their circle time or quiet time or reading time, and then pop out if you can't stay. That's okay. We have recorded the lecture. You can go back and read the lecture. And if you have the opportunity with your child care program director to leave the facility and come here on campus, do that. We would love to see you. So that's sort of an unofficial version of high flex with that. A lot of the program classes for that program, because the coordinator has identified that that is a need for the people who work in the field. And we don't want to say to you, well, quit your job or leave for extended time and get in trouble. We want to say, pop in if you can. And if you cannot, the lecture is recorded.
No, that's very helpful. And so we're almost at time. So in 30 seconds or less, and this is for all of you. So could you share, if you had one thing or some additional takeaways for the audience around this project or this issue in general, kind of what are some closing thoughts? And Iris, we'll start with you.
So I think the main thing that I would take away is that it takes a lot of coordination, but actually looking at your college with new eyes is worth it. And if you can just carve out some time to do some of that planning and connecting and asking the people who are engaged in your institution, it can be incredibly powerful. I'll just take the HiFlex thing for a second. As a parent myself, even if I have childcare, if my kid's sick, I can't use the childcare, right? So I may prefer a face-to-face course. I want to be face-to-face as much as possible, but if I have a sick kid, I can't make the lecture. I either miss class, or if I could like pivot online, that gives me flexibility. So we do have a whole section about course flexibility in the playbook. And I think that is I think they're all very important points and they all will help a lot. But that is just one thing I wanted to add on that piece.
Thanks, Chris.
Yeah, I would just add that community colleges are already doing so much great work. And a lot of what we had to do is really just think about synthesizing it and kind of like communicating it to students. And so I would say that even though there have been times the past few years where it's felt incredibly challenging, don't be discouraged, because your campus is likely already doing so many amazing things. And really just think about how you can take a step back, think about synthesizing that work, think about communicating it to students, and not like you've got to start everything over, but rather just kind of evaluate what's working, what do students need, and then how do we kind of like tell that story and bridge that gap.
Thanks. And Nashunda, final words to you.
I agree with what Iris and what Chris said, because the good and the bad is you're not alone. You're not the only community college struggling. Your students are not the only students who need more. And so take the time. Take the time to find out what they need, bring all the stakeholders in the room, and everyone's face will light up when you ask them, what do you think we can do?
Well, on that note, I would just like to extend a huge thanks to our panelists for sharing their work and experiences and lifting up some great strategies to bring students back to campus. New America continues to be a leader in the higher education space, and I have to say ACCT is thrilled to be able to share that space with them, bringing attention to issues that face community colleges. So I'm including a link to the resource in the chat, and I will also include it in the email, the follow-up email that goes out to anyone who's registered, along with a link to the recording of this webinar. So thank you all for attending, and I hope this sparks some ideas that you can take back to your institutions. I hope everyone enjoys the rest of their day. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Steve.